Okay, so till now, whatever we have done is we are creating a front end application for our user API backend, right? So it's nothing but API that we have built, and we are building an application in front end which will consume this API and render the user data into a UI. Okay, and this is going to be done using plain vanilla JavaScript. Okay, I have already built HTML for it. So a simple title and a template. This is just a template. And we will fill this with the help of JavaScript later on. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to fill that inside this users container, right? I need to select this first. So let me select that. So const users container equals to get the element with the ID of users. And we have this container ready, right? So once we have that, the second thing that we need is we need to make a get request to our API, right? But the thing is, you should make sure that our API is running as well, right? So we have started our server API in the port 3000, right? So let's get it. So, but the thing is, it's asynchronous task. I hope everybody knows how asynchronous JavaScript already works, right? Okay, so I'm going to do try catch block, but even before that, I'm going to create a function which will fetch the user's data. Okay, so I'm going to create a function called as get users, and it's a asynchronous function. So that function will be prefixed with the async keyword, right? It's a regular function now. So observe this. But in order to use this await, so we have to be in a asynchronous function. Okay, async await, they come along, they work together, right? Okay, I'll just show you once again. So I'm going to make a fetch request to this URL, localhost 3000, and the get to users, right? Observe this. This is what we are making simply, okay, without this. Basically, we are sending this request from our JavaScript with the help of the fetch function, right? And we are awaiting for it. If anything goes wrong, it will be caught in the catch block. So I'm going to use the try catch block here. Okay. All the things that you want to try out, do it in the try block. So once we have the data, usually data will be in the form of what? Whenever you make a request to a API for some kind of data, it will always send you in the form of readable string. You need to convert it into JSON manually. Okay. And you do that with the help of response.json method. Okay. So this is available, .json method available on every single response. You can simply use this method. Clear? Sorry, I need to take this down. Okay. So for now, I'm just going to log this and check what's going on. Okay. So I also need to execute this function now. I'm going to execute it, meaning I'm simply calling it here. That's it. Okay. So we have an error saying failed to fetch something here. Okay. So observe here, we might have an error. Okay. So the main error that we are getting here is access to fetch because of the origin, which has been blocked by the CORS policy. This is a very regular issue, and it can be solved very easily. CORS basically means that cross origin resource sharing. It's a policy that you need to be installed in your backend, okay, which is very easy. So go to your backend application. This needs to be installed mandatorily. Okay. So I will open terminal again. That's the problem. I'm going to take a new terminal. I will get inside the user API application once again, and I will install a package called as cars. Okay, it's a third-party library. You have to install it before using it. Okay, so once that is done, get back to your app.js. Okay, so import it once again at the top level. Const app equals to require the cars. Sorry, it's not app, it's cars. Here, the first step that we did is installing the cars. So cars basically means what? It means cross origin resource sharing, right? So once that is done, you have to use this cars, which is basically a function, use it as a middleware function. Okay, so we have already discussed how to execute middleware functions. So whenever we wanted to access information from the request, which is present in the request.body, you have to execute a middleware function called as express.json, right? So which is a middleware function. You execute it with the help of app.use method, right? The same way, we have the second middleware, that is the cars function. You need to execute it, right? So you can simply execute it here. Okay. So again, if you want to execute a middleware, it's the app.use method and simply call this cars function. Clear? I think this will basically solve your problem. So I hope my application is running fine. I'll check it again. Okay, it's working. Okay, so this should solve the cost problem already. Observe the front end now. So JavaScript was able to send the request properly, and we have the data. So this is all the users' data that we have in the front end now, right? So for every single user data that we have received from the API, we need to start rendering UI with the help of JS, right? So let's just do it quickly here. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is instead of logging, I will just render it here itself. Okay. So I'm going to call it as render user data. Okay. So instead of logging it, I'm going to render it now. So how do you want to render it? Right. So I'm going to create, I'm going to basically loop on this data, which is an array, right? So let me just see it again. It's a big array containing objects. Okay. So I'll come back here. First, I will try to have a dummy HTML. I'm going to call it as users HTML. Okay. Equals to, it will be an empty string initially. Okay. Maybe I will make it as let, not const. So then I will start adding one user at a time to this user's HTML. Okay, so data is an array. On top of it, you will be able to get a method called as for each, right? Data dot for each. And inside this for each method, you will be able to pass another function, right? So that will be having access to every single user in the data array. So this is the name that we have given user. Now let's start using it. Okay, so so I will just copy the template from here. This is the user template that we want to create out of the data, right? So I'm going to come back here. So const user HTML equals to this. Okay, but the thing is here, the name should be coming from user.name. The age should be coming from user.age, right? So every single data has user data, and every single user data has name, age, country, gender, all those things. So let's start filling out those things into the string, right? So how do you make it dynamic? So add dollar and flower brackets, user dot name. And I'm going to take this down and it's simply dollar user dot age. And the country is again user dot country. And this one user dot gender. Okay. So once you have this user HTML, I'm going to add this to the user's HTML. Okay, this is just one user HTML, and this will be generated for every single user in this data array. All right, so let's concatenate it. So users HTML. Okay, this is the users HTML. So I'm going to concatenate this with the user HTML. Clear? So I think that's the basic thing here. Sorry. Okay, so once you concatenate this, we will have this user HTMLs ready. It will be rendered with every single user data. But we need to bring this to the DOM, meaning we need to add every single user's data into the user's container here. That's what we have selected. Like we'll render like 10 users and dump it inside the user's container, right? So come outside here. Once we have done the looping, once we have generated the user's data, now user's container dot inner HTML, you can simply add all these things, users HTML. This is totally fine. Okay, so let's just save and come outside, click refresh. Okay, I think we need to execute this function. Take this thing here and execute this function once. Okay, so as you can see, we have the complete users information being rendered here. Okay, maybe I will add a bit more CSS. Dot users. I'm going to say display of flex and justify content. Center, align items center, and flex wrap to wrap. Okay. It ID. So I need to use hash here. Okay, so we have all the users information here. Okay, so this is how we can consume the API that we have created from the front end with vanilla JavaScript. Of course, we have only consumed the get method. Okay, so now how can we send a post request, right? So let's say I want to add a new user, right? So we need to have a form here. Let's have a form. Okay, so let's not worry about the action and everything. So maybe I have everything automatically generated. So we have the name and name, email and email. I think these are the only fields we have. Maybe I will just try to comment and say generate name, age, country, and gender. Okay, so for now, the gender is again, it's a input simple element. Okay, this is fine as well. Okay, so observe here, let's just go to the front end. So we have name, age, country, gender. I think that's what 4 fields we have, right? So once this is submitted, it should be submitted to the front end and we should get the new data as well here, right here. That's what we want, right? Okay, so how do we do it, right? So once the form is submitted, it actually triggers an event called as submit event. Okay, let's select this form in the JavaScript once. Okay, so come back here, const form HTML of form element equals to document dot selector. This is fine for now. Okay, basically we might have to select every single element that there is here. We need to select all these four input fields as well, right? That is important as well because we have to read the values from these fields. It's basic JavaScript, right? So let's select those fields as well. Okay. So const name input. Okay. Age input element and country input element and the gender input element. I just want to make sure that I have given IDs respectively as well. So every single input here has an ID of name, ID of age, and of country. Okay, so this is fine as well. So now, what do we need to do? Whenever this form is submitted, we need to send all this data to our API, right? Okay, so here we just simply rendered it initially. Okay, so but we need to make an API call only when this form is submitted. So select this form element once again, and I'm going to add an event listener to it. And what is the event? It's a submit event. Okay. When this submit event occurs, of course, we want to prevent its default behavior. What happens when a form is submitted? Observe, whenever you submit a form, it refreshes the page, right? So observe here, if I click on submit, it refreshes the entire page, meaning your application relaunches again and again. So you cannot make a proper API request. So first we will stop its default behavior and we will try to do whatever we want later on. Okay. So for that, we will take this event object, right? So e dot prevent default, right? So this will basically stop the page from refreshing. Now you can check it's not refreshing, right? So next is we need to generate an object with all these values, right? So let's generate that. So const user is basically an array with name input element dot value, all these things. So just observe this quickly, right? So for this user, which is basically an object, the name value will come from the input elements value. Age value come from the input elements value, right? So that's it. With its respects input elements value, we are going to store it in the user object, right? So once you're ready with this object, now we are good to go and make an API request to um, our API, right? So just say fetch. Maybe we don't have to wait for the response this time. We'll simply send a fetch request. Okay. So I'll just explain this code. This is simply front-end code. You should be already knowing it. Okay. This is not the first time, right? So observe this using the fetch function with the route as previous one, HTTP, localhost, port number 3000, users is the user endpoint. But observe here, this is the object. Okay, sorry, this one up to here. Okay, so this object is called as options object, right? So if it is a get request like here, you don't have to mention any options. A default fetch request is always a get type. You don't have to mention anything. But whenever you're making a post request or any other request, you have to mention it manually with the options object. Okay, so the key method will suggest what type of request type you're sending, right? And you have to set this headers, okay, because we are going to send JSON data as well. When we are sending the data to our API, it will be in the form of JSON. So this is a basically header. So I will talk about headers later again. So just know that every single request or response that you send around, they all contain headers. So headers are basically a piece of information. Okay, they're objects which contain a lot of types of information. Okay, you can literally embed any type of information. Okay, so here the headers saying that the type of information that we are sending is a JSON type of information, and information itself is sent with the body key, right? So you already know request dot body contains the form value that we send, right? So this is where we attach body, and then we will convert our user object, right? This is JavaScript object, and into a JSON value with the help of JSON.stringify method. So this is very important step as well. You cannot send JavaScript object to a API. It needs to be converted into a string. Only strings can be transmitted through URL. Okay, you need to remember that. So now once you converted this, so this is basically it up to here. This is the fetch request. Because this is a asynchronous function, so we are trying to analyze the response back using the then and catch method. Okay, so if this is successful, we are getting a response back, and we are simply saying response.json. Again, this is again a response will be in the form of readable stream. You want to access the data there. This is how you access it. Okay, we are simply logging it for now. So one more thing that it has automatically done is we're rendering this user data once again. Okay, so this is a quite a tricky thing, because once you have submitted the user, if you want to see the result in the DOM once again, you need to re-render the user data. Okay, there is a mistake in this code. We'll solve it again. Okay, so now let's refresh, open the terminal as well. So the console here. Okay, so there is no error. So let's submit some test user data here. So it's, let's say 25, the country, let's make it to India, and gender of male. Okay, so I'm going to hit submit. So the page was refreshed. If you scroll down, so we still don't have the test user, all right? Yes, we don't have a test user. I think there was a problem here. Mm. Okay, let me just open and see if there is any error here. For some reason, the page is being refreshed, right? Okay, so this should not happen. And simply commenting out this fetch method for now. So we have successfully created the object. Okay, so there is something wrong with this fetch method here. I just check my, maybe I will try to cut this out and create it as a different function outside. Okay, so same as here. So const post data. I'm going to create user. It's asynchronous one, async function. So this function is basically having try catch block as previous one. This was about rendering one. This is about creating one. And here, simply we are sending a request to the fetch with the same things with the method of this. Everything is normal. Let me not do this rendering the user data for now. Okay. Okay. So here I'm simply going to call this function, create user function. For some reason, this is keep refreshing the page again and again, the post request. Let me just see whether it's being loaded in the data folder as well. Yes, so the data is being loaded here. Test user. Okay. Okay, sorry. It's already working. Okay. So it's being submitted, it's being reloaded, test user. We're getting all this data, empty data as well. Okay. Okay, so this was actually working. Sorry, I got a bit confused here. So observe here, these were the test user that I created initially, right? They're all here. So I just create final one and observe, let's say test user final and age of some 80 and country of Germany and gender of female. Okay, and click on submit. So we have this test user final as well. Clear? So I hope this is clear up to here, and we can do the React consuming tomorrow. Okay, so I know it went fast. I will explain a bit quicker now. I will recap everything, whatever we have done. So I want to make sure that everybody is okay up to here. Any doubts do we have? Srivatsa, any doubts?
No, sir.
Okay, it was purely front end today, right? But it's very important as well because people would be able to create an API, but they wouldn't know how to consume it. So the most important part here that you have to do in the backend whenever you want to test your API from a front end is that you need to have this separate package called as cars. This is the first important step. Okay, so install this. And how do you embed this into the code? So first you need to import it and run it as a middleware function. Okay, so this basically implements the cars policy. Clear? So once you are done with this, you'll be able to send requests from the same system. Okay, there will be two servers running and they can send requests to each other in the same system. I have a client server running in my own computer and a API server running in the same system. That's why you have to have this CORS policy. The browsers won't allow you to send requests if this is not set. Okay, so once that is done, the next important thing here is you have to have your HTML file, which is ready here. Sorry. Okay, this one. Okay, so first you need to have this template. Okay, so I will comment this down. So this was just for the template, and you can have this CSS as well, basic CSS, and this is the front end main code. Okay, so I have selected every single element that is needed from the DOM, and I have created the first function called as render user data. It basically sends a get request to the our API, and once it gets the data, I have done more JavaScript. I have a simple users HTML which will be initially empty, and then one for every single data that there is in this data array, we are going to create this template and add it to the outside HTML element. And then we are taking this users HTML and embedding it into the user container, which is this. Okay, this is the users container. Okay, so that's what we did here basically. So that basically renders, and we simply called it here. Okay, you can call it wherever you want. Okay, so we have the second function called as create user, which will send a post request to our API with the user data that it collects from the form. Okay, when it is submitted. Okay, so how does it send? It will set the method, it will set the body, it will set an header. These three are the most important keys that you have to have in the options object. Okay, so finally, you will also handle form. You will handle this form submission. You have this default behavior prevented. You will gather the data, create the user in the server. That's it. Clear? Okay. So that's it. And you guys can try with the React. And if you don't know how to do this in React, I will take an extra time tomorrow. If you already know how to work with this in React, we don't have to do anything. Okay. So if you guys don't know how to implement this in React, it will be an extra class again. Okay. So please do go through this thing, how to do this in React and all. Okay. So then we can move on to MongoDB database tomorrow itself. Okay. Any other doubts? No, right?
No, sir.
Okay. So see you guys tomorrow then. Thank you.